Bernice Bass de Martinez with us today. I want to begin with a very brief history of the Hawaii Association of International Buddhists. For those of you who may not know much about our organization, and then we'll get right into our program. It was in January of 1992 that the Hawaii Association of International Buddhists came officially into being with the adoption of its bylaws. The purpose of the organization is clearly stated in the preamble of the bylaws as follows. We, the Buddhists of Hawaii, seeking to represent all Buddhist schools and traditions, agree as follows. 1, to foster friendship and understanding among all Buddhist groups. 2, to secure solidarity among them through realization of the essential unity of all Buddhist schools. 3, to promote the development of spirituality for improving the quality of life among Buddhists as well as humanity as a whole. And 4, to organize programs for the achievement of peace and harmony through Buddhism's benign spirit of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, and the pursuit of happiness and well-being for all humankind. Our program today is very much in accord with these purposes. HABE's fundamental purpose is to recognize and celebrate unity within the diversity among Buddhists in Hawaii. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the official founding of HABE, as we call it. But HABE's beginnings extend back almost 50 years to the early 1970s. HABE volunteers are currently researching available documents and archives to accurately document all those involved in HABE's formative phase, which was really the 1970s through 1989. And then we entered what we're calling the organizational phase of HABE, 1990 and 91, when HABE became incorporated and received 501c3 tax-exempt status as a nonprofit corporation. And then we are now in the contemporary phase, 1992 to the present. This complete history of HABE will be on our website one of these days, hopefully this year in our anniversary year. I want to mention those who were instrumental in the founding and formation of HABE. Firstly, the late Honpa Hongwanji Bishop Yoshiaki Fujitani, and also the late University of Hawaii religion professor David Chappell, and the late Richard Pa'u. Also crucial in HABE's organizational phase was pro bono legal assistance from the late Herbert Hayato Tanigawa and his son, attorney Michael K. Tanigawa. We are deeply grateful to these fine people and the many others who helped establish HABE and support its work throughout the years. Today, and for the last 30 years, HABE has been an active organization of individuals with diverse Buddhist backgrounds coming together to get to know one another, learn the rich and varied practices of our different Buddhist traditions, and to promote spirituality and well-being for all humankind. In this, HABE's 30th anniversary year, we especially invite you to join HABE and support our work. The easiest way to do that is to visit HABE's website, hawaiibuddhists.org, and on the homepage, you'll see a little button up in the upper right-hand corner that says Join HABE. Click on that, and that's all you need to do. Follow the forms, and your participation will be much appreciated. Thank you all. We're going to begin our celebration of Juneteenth and recognition of Juneteenth today with a recitation of the Vow of Humankind, written by the accomplished professor and Zen layman Shinichi Hisamatsu. HABE board member and director of our internet and social media activities, Reverend Hirosato Yoshida, will offer the recitation. Hiro?
Vow of humankind, calm and composed, awakening to our true self, practicing ardently our compassion, making full use of our abilities, according to our respective vocations, discerning suffering both individual and social and its causes, recognizing the right course for history to proceed. Let us join hands as kin beyond the differences of race, nation, and class. With love and compassion, we vow to bring the realization humankind's deep desire for liberation by making every effort to create a world that is peaceful and joyous. Thank you.
Oh, it's me to introduce now. Is Michael come to say anything yet? No.
Yeah, I must have clicked the wrong button there when those messages kept popping up about the recording. So I had to click back in. Did Hiro offer the recitation? Yes, thank you, Hiro. Sorry, folks, for ducking out there. Yes, now, without further ado, let's have the introduction of our guest speaker today. Our introduction will be done by Dr. Porani Natchajecha Sponsel. Porani?
Thank you, President Michael. I hope everyone who are here would have a chance to read the very informative biography from our speaker, Dr. Bernice Bass de Martinez. So I just want to give you a behind the scene information, right? I call her Bernice. We know each other over 20 years when we still work full-time at university, my at Chaminade, and she on the mainland. And as a women in higher education, we have a group that organized by the Office of Higher Education in Washington, D.C. The first time I met Bernice was at this meeting to invite the leader administration from each university to come. The purpose is that we want to get more of the ethnic minority to create a more equal statistic. At that time, the women who are in the position of the president are mainly white women, and we have 2 or 3 Hispanic, only 1 from Hawaii, Dr. Rose Singh then, and then we have a lot from African American, not a lot in comparing to the white women. And at the time, Bernice was a vice president of a university there, and then she assigned to be the one who mentoring our group here in Hawaii. We call it network. It actually, the purpose is just to get all the women in higher education in the administration position to come together and support each other. And Bernice has been a good friend since then. From a colleague to a good friend, now we are sisters because we have things in common. We love to eat good food. We like to travel. And so every time when we go to the mainland or when she's here, we get together. And when COVID is done, we plan to go together to Thailand to explore the world. And as you see from her detail, she has a heart to help many people. So she got the honorary degree in one of the university outside the US, and she has many positions here. Like we heard earlier, she already retired, but her heart still with the student and faculty at university. She's still actively helping at U of Sacramento there in California. So without further ado, so this is how we come about. So that's why Bernice came to help us with the first Juneteenth celebration for her. Thank you, sister.
Thank you, sister. And it really, you're right, 20 plus years, and it's all been fun, everybody. I want to take a moment to recognize this distinguished organization and to thank the organization and its leadership and my sister friend for this invitation to participate with you today. This organization has a very distinguished commitment as stated in its mission. I would encourage you and your membership to continue. What a value you're adding for so many people. That said, it seems quite logical to think about Juneteenth. And in thinking about Juneteenth, I want to provide for you not only some information, some facts, and of course, one could talk about this newly recognized holiday forever because there is a lot of history associated. But that said, I want to make sure that you have enough facts so that as you tell others about Juneteenth, you'll be able to relate tidbits to them as if storytelling. And storytelling is really a way that we get others to not only hear us, but to have what we're saying resonate with them. So Juneteenth, let's think about what can it mean? And in this case, the me is you. But if you said it to yourself, and I hope you will, what can it mean to me? Have some goals for today. I'm hoping that you will hear about an incredibly important moment in the US history that many people have never heard of. Even since a year ago, the sitting president identified Juneteenth as a national holiday. Another goal, to build an understanding of the context in which this historical event happened. And third, to discuss and reflect how this information better informs each of us and can increase our understanding and empathy for those directly impacted by the event. Now, Juneteenth has gone by a number of names, and probably when you hear some of these names, it might resonate with you. I think more frequently we hear these names in the Southeast or around the state of Texas. But Juneteenth National Independence Day, Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Black Independence Day, Liberation Day. Regardless of what you call it, it is an American holiday now, designated to be celebrated on June 19th. Back in 1865, the Emancipation Proclamation was had already been issued. And we often remember President Lincoln for having done that. Now, an interesting piece, it wasn't until June of 1865 when it was formally proclaimed in the state of Texas. And that was done by Garton Granger, who was a designee representing Lincoln. And while there might have been others who in Texas knew about this, until it was formally stated, they didn't have to do anything about it. A point. Enslaved people had already been emancipated. But if you don't know it, you're not free. And the June 19th announcement really came nearly 2.5 years after Lincoln made his statement. And of course, it was on a holiday, January 1, New Year's Day. I mean, and think about it, 1863, there certainly was no internet. There were no fax machines. Not everyone had a telephone, and carrier pigeons didn't always go where they were supposed to. That said, there were over 250,000 enslaved people in Texas, and most likely more in other states that had not been occupied by the Union Army, which many people don't know. It was only states that had been occupied by the Union Army that were affected directly, most immediately, by the Emancipation Proclamation. Another point, the announcement actually urged the freed men and the freed women to stay with their former owners. There's some interesting pieces about that. We all have a car. That's something we own. We might own a house. Another something we own. But then we get an edict. We're told to free it or let it go. In this case, we're talking about human beings who did incredible labor for those who owned them. And while initially in the original Emancipation Proclamation, owners were to receive some kind of compensation, most slave owners said it would never, ever, ever be enough. And that was certainly the feeling amongst those in the state of Texas. Third, as continued, Granger said the freedmen were advised to remain quietly in their present homes and to work for wages. Slaves were not to have been educated. As a matter of fact, any slave that was taught to read, those teaching in many places was punishable by death. So how would one, and it's just a rhetorical question, who has been a slave know how to negotiate wage in comparison to work? Furthermore, the edict said none of the freed persons were to collect around military posts, and they were not to be idle anywhere. So the question, where do you go? What do you do? How do you know how to behave? The new freedom created a number of other problems, and these were particular in the state of Texas. Despite the announcement, Texas slave owners really weren't eager to set their property free. Oftentimes, when the people tried to leave, many were beaten, they were lynched or murdered. Some secondhand, third-hand discussion, stories of people who jumped in the river where they were shot. Another who talked about having decided to stay with the mistress, the owner, and had said before the freedom, she was beaten every day because she was told she couldn't work hard enough. And after the freedom announcement, she was beaten again every day because she was a freed person who didn't work hard enough. And there are many, many other stories. Scatter was something that occurred as the result of Juneteenth, the Juneteenth announcement, particularly in the state of Texas. The owners of slaves in Texas were known to be rather cruel with their property. They often sold off family members, new babies. It was about isolating individuals so that they wouldn't network, wouldn't develop relationships, and became beholden more so to the slave owner. In fact, as the announcement was being read, many slaves began to leave, running away, dropping everything that they had, which was almost nothing, and leaving. And they really were leaving in hopes of finding lost relatives, sold relatives, or some place, some accommodation, as they had heard in the North, that would be more welcoming and more supportive. Over time, many of the freed people wanted to celebrate. You know, of course, freedom is something that's incredibly personal. And when you have such large numbers of individuals who experienced freedom, gathering to recognize it, to reflect on it, was significant. Actually, the first anniversary in Texas, a year after the announcement, folks faced a huge problem. New segregation laws had been put in place. The laws said there should be no gathering of freed persons or former slaves or enslaved people in public places, in parks. Those laws also limited use of public properties, including swimming pools, certainly hotels, and churches even. So there became a problem of where do you go to celebrate? The other component of many of the segregation laws, it prohibited large numbers of individuals coming together. And depending on where the law was written, 10, sometimes 5, was considered too large of a number together. With such limited options, in the 1870s, several of the emancipated people were able to pull together about $800. Now, in 1870, $800 was a lot of money, a lot more than it is today. I guess maybe we can get, what, is it 4 tanks of gas now? I'm not sure, but anyway, that $800 purchased 10 acres of land, and it became known as Emancipation Park. And that location stayed as Emancipation Park through the early 1950s. And in Houston, that was the one and only place where Black peoples could swim, could meet together, because it was private property. And remember the segregation laws, it said public property. Black peoples owned Emancipation Park. So it was their property. Now there's some history since then by which Emancipation Park was redefined. And of course, the ownership was removed. But that's not our emphasis today. But the point in case is, as freedmen became more adaptive to their environment, more segregation laws and other prohibitions came to be. Whatever it would be to stop the advancement of those who were working hard to advance. So without a place to meet, Juneteenth celebrations begin to wane. And of course, if you can't meet together, you can't be together. And it wasn't just the fact of meeting together. It was also the worry and concern about the oppression from all sides, the need for jobs, the need for healthcare, quality education, the need for, as some would say today, social justice. And what many who have followed the history of Juneteenth say, and it's rather interesting, the same concerns about oppression seem to be today's concerns about oppression, not just of Black peoples, but all peoples of color, all individuals who are viewed as different than, or not necessarily as those in charge or those who make decisions believe they should be. There was an increase in Jim Crow laws. And what is very little known, not only what happened in Texas, but there is a location in Mississippi where many freed slaves ran. It's a southern Mississippi, a very tiny, tiny town. However, it was cut off from all other benefits, such as health care, schooling, housing support, water even. And Marion Wright Edelman, I don't know if that name is familiar to many, but she's well known. I see a thumbs up, Michael, thank you. And I see some other people shaking their heads, but for all of the work she's done around health care, but particularly concerns about young children and their advancement. She took the sitting president to that area in the early 60s. And what was most astounding, you could see children with extended bellies, just as we see in many of the advertisements to give money to feed the world hungry. But children who were experiencing the exact same thing in what we call America, the USA. The sitting president at that time suggested that Dr. Edelman get in touch with Martin Luther King Jr. And when Martin Luther King Jr. actually visited, it is said he left with tears in his eyes. And while they were planning the march on Washington, a Poor People's March became part of the events. And people from that particular location in Mississippi were invited to come to Washington in wagon trains, and they camped outside of the Capitol. And if those of you who were watching the news at that time, you might recall there was a statement of, oh, and there are people camping out. But there was very little information about who are those campers. These were the campers. And it was so elected officials could see with their eyes that, yes, in the US of A, there are people who are starving. And they're right outside on your doorstep. Go look, go see. Well, with that brought to the forefront, and we know the result of the march on Washington in the early 60s, a few things began to change. And because there were so many people at the march from around the nation, there was a re-enlightenment about Juneteenth. And so many people took that information back to their home states, and we began to see an insurgence of Juneteenth celebrations. And that's kind of a bit of history. All of a sudden, Juneteenth was reborn. And everyone started to say, that's the remembrance of our ancestors. Well, it's now a federal holiday. And we also should thank a lady named Opal Lee, who at 94 years old began walking state to state. And unfortunately, it was only in the continental US. I don't think she made it to Hawaii or to Alaska, but she kept walking and walking and told her story everywhere. Even appeared with President Biden, and at the signing of the bill into law on June 17th of 2021, she was there observing. And this is Opal Lee. Who was she? Who is she? Retired teacher, counselor, advocate for youth and families. She dedicated her life to making sure that wherever she was, children got the best of education possible. Here's a flag that became the symbol of Juneteenth. And as you look at that flag, it's got some significant meaning. So keep that in your eye. And let's look at what the meanings are. The colors red, white, and blue echo the American flag, because all of this happened in America. The descendants of the slaves were and are Americans. The star in the middle of that flag recognizes Texas. You know, they call it the Lone Star State, and proudly so. While the bursting star on the horizon with the red and blue fills represent a new people and a new freedom. And if you look at that, you know, just looking at it, you wouldn't know. But thinking about the symbolic nature of the items, it makes sense. So what are the ways that any of us can celebrate Juneteenth? We really don't want this to become a commercial holiday. You know, one where you open the newspaper or you turn on TV and they say, big sale, 50% off, come and buy X, Y, and Z. So what could we do? Well, you could watch a documentary about slavery. You can check out activities at the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture, its website. You know, since the pandemic, it's incredible what the Smithsonian museums have on their websites. But this one particularly has lots and lots and lots of information, and not such complicated things that any of us can do if we want to celebrate. How about reading books by Black authors and poets? You know, the youngest poet laureate was at the inauguration, and she's still writing poetry. She did release a poem about Juneteenth, and it's really interesting. You can look it up on the internet and get your copy. How about listening to audiobooks written and or narrated by Black authors and poets? I mean, oftentimes we get in our cars and we throw in a tape to listen. But what if we consciously say, oh, I'm going to make sure it's a Black author? How about eating in a Black-owned restaurant? Or donating to a Black-led nonprofit or community organization or church? Here's the one that oftentimes we shy away from. Talk to your children about race. Because if we don't talk to them about race, somebody else will, and it might not be what we like. So we have a choice. And by the way, we don't always have to have the answers. Sometimes our children just want to be heard. And so if we listen, they're heard. Last comment. While celebrating each Juneteenth event, I want to remind us that we all have a responsibility, and we have to take action. And it's kind of, we can't wait for, oh, my neighbor's going to do it, or the people down the street will do it. It means each of us, all of us. And the responsibility is to identify and abolish policies and practices that perpetrate racism and exclusion. And on this Juneteenth, let us recommit to doing that exact thing. Not only commit to ourselves, but to others. Now, I understand we're going to do breakout groups, but before we go, because I'll hand it back over to my sister friend and she'll take care of that. But is there anything you want to say or ask or comment you want to make? Please, and I think what would be helpful if you can use the hand raised feature. I'm all ears. And I'm not shy, so please.
Oh, okay. Actually, Bernice,
Yes,
Les want
ma'am.
to say something.
Oh, please. Les.
Aloha, Bernice.
Aloha.
This was superb, really informative, revealing, but at many times painful.
Yes.
And for me, it begins to make me think of the depth of suffering that people have experienced throughout the history of the US. And I wanted to ask, what about the future, the short term and the long term? Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Thank you.
Wow.
I don't want to make you suffer, but I'm just curious.
No. And thank you for the question. You know, it depends, what day is it?
Oh,
I think we all hear news, and I'm a news freak, just like I'm a foodie too. Like somebody you and I both know said we like to eat. Well, I'm addicted to the news, and I try to be neutral and hear all of it. But sometimes it is discouraging. But you know, I've always been of the belief it will take me to energize me. And I always remind myself I have a choice. I can feel bad today or this morning, but how am I going to end my day? I do talk to myself sometimes. And I'm being really serious. And making that commitment. Because I recognize being optimistic all of the time, I never know who I'm going to run into. And I'm about encouraging others to help others. And it's all about, what am I doing to encourage the person I'm with? And frankly, that first person is me. That's a great question. Thank you. Terry?
great answer.
I knew someone from Texas about 50 years ago,
Mhm.
when I was like 13, and she told us that they were teaching in the South that they had won the war.
Yeah.
So, and then the movie, The Butler, it talked about slavery and stuff. And I thought, well, why are these people still slaves? Then I realized, well, if they had been told, they wouldn't know, right? I mean, how long were people under the false impression that they were still slaves.
Mhm. Far too long. And
Yeah,
even after that notice on June 19th, there were some, if they didn't hear it, I mean, there was no internet.
yeah.
We were forbidden to gather to talk with other people.
So for like 50 years ago, there were still people on this planet that thought they were slaves. Is that what we're saying?
Well, 50 years ago, not necessarily, no. But possibly 100 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of the butler is symbolic. It's not to be taken literally.
However, part of the story was built on a real life.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, it's a movie, and movies don't sell unless there's action. So there has to be some fiction in the action to sell the movie tickets.
We have two hand raised.
Oh, thank
yeah.
you, Carol.
Aloha. Hi, everyone. I'm Carol Ann. Thank you so much for holding this today. I can't tell you how many people in Texas I told about this. I grew up in Texas. I only moved to Hawaii about 12 years ago. And I sent this. I haven't looked at the participants. I was just looking at participants to see if any of them were on there. I was hoping my friend, the wonderful writer, Linda Jones, the hair activist, the natural hair activist, Linda Jones, but I don't see her. But anyway, I'm thrilled. Thank you so much for holding this, and thank you for letting me be a part of it. I wasn't going to say anything, but then when Terry said what she said, I'm like, well, Terry, it was officially, as Bernice said, 4 years before anyone who was enslaved in Texas ever got the word that they were no longer enslaved, that they heard about the Emancipation Proclamation. But Bernice is exactly correct. It's not like people then all picked up their cell phones and sent out a group text to every slave who then just reached, said, oh, what's that? Oh, a group text. We're free. Free is and Bernice made this point earlier too, free is a relative point. Where are you going to go? Because you were born on this land, you were the property of the owners of this land, just like the land itself. You had a job there, you got food there. It may not have been the greatest food. You might have had to collect it yourself. You had shelter. It may not have been the greatest shelter, but you had a place to live. And where are you going to go? Just all of a sudden you're free. And now what? And Bernice was making the very poignant point that people who stayed were treated no better. Technically, they were free, and they may have even known it. Nothing changed in their lives. And to be especially cynical, sorry, some days, like you say, Bernice, it depends on the day, right? Am I optimistic or pessimistic or cynical about the day? Some days I wonder if anyone really knows they're free, especially in the lower parts of the former Confederacy, looking forward to October and 3 major things that we're told when the Supreme Court comes back into session are going to change. The law, 3 major laws of this land are expected to change in October. And that's going to affect the freedom of lots and lots of people, especially BIPOC, especially people of color, especially people in poverty, and not just in the former Confederacy, but throughout the United States. I also want to point out that the Confederacy, the former Confederacy, does not have a unique claim to prejudice. New York City, Manhattan is my other favorite island next to Oahu. And it's a smorgasbord of racism if you're looking for it. It's always there. Something's always there. But I just want to say Juneteenth, for me, having grown up in Texas as an Anglo person who did recognize Juneteenth, my mother's a psychology professor, my parents were very progressive, walked their Christian talk. We wanted to celebrate with people who, wanted, we definitely believed everyone was equal in the eyes of God and should be in the eyes of law as well. And for Juneteenth to now be a nationally recognized federal holiday is blowing my mind. I am so thrilled. The whole world, it's almost like, Bernice, it's almost like our own Juneteenth. Some people are hearing for the first time in America what Juneteenth made, about how, you mean people were free and they didn't know it? And the rest of America is finding out about then. It's like kind of like our own Juneteenth announcement. So I don't know. I'm rambling all over the place, Terry. I guess my point was that a lot of people still don't know they're free and don't realize what's within them. And I feel humbled and privileged that we can help others recognize that in themselves and become free in many ways. When Bernice was asking, what can we do individually to celebrate Juneteenth without turning it into an annual mattress sale like President's Day is? I would say we could work to try to eliminate the inequality in our institutions, and especially healthcare, because that's where I work, especially healthcare for people of color, and especially here in our most diverse, culturally and ethnically diverse state in the union. So thank you. I'll stop rambling now. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you so much, Carol. We have time for one more question from David. Bernice, David.
Okay, I will take it. Hi,
Okay.
David.
Hello, Dr. Martinez. Thank you so much for the presentation. It rang a lot of bells for me. And one of the very first things I wrote down was when you said, if you don't know it, you're not free. And this is basically related to what some of the comments that have just been made. But I think as Buddhists, we try to awaken to the truth by listening to the Dharma, by going to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the three treasures. And sometimes we can see it in the words or hear the words, and yet we're still bound by our blind passions. And so we've heard it, we know freedom is there, but we're still not free ourselves. And so I just think it's really interesting. It's something that is a lot of, it's a great jumping off point for kind of thinking about Buddhism and this idea of receiving the word about freedom and liberation, but trying to actualize it in our own understanding and lives. So it's a very rich thing to consider. And I agree with Les too about just sort of the enormity of the suffering that was inflicted upon Black peoples, and some of your words evoked some of that for me as well. So I thank you for that, because it's really important, I think, for us to feel that. So I'm looking forward to the small group discussions and discussing more. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. So it's just about good timing. Okay, so I already create a breakout room, and that one maybe one or two or three, and I know there are people like couple Terry and Sam and Katie and Clark, and also so I'm going to open all the room, and then you will see the invitation to join. And Bernice not joining. However, if you want Bernice to visit your breakout room, you can send a message and we will send her there. And I think how many, we have about 15 minutes, right? Let me double check the program one more time. I believe, okay, I have it. We have about 20 minutes actually in the breakout room. Okay, so enough time for you to have the good discussion, 20 minutes, and because only few people. So everyone see the invitation to join the breakout room? Yeah, please click join, and then yeah, you don't see that?
I don't see the invitation. I see recording live YouTube, and I don't see the invitation yet.
Oh, that's okay. Let me do it again one more time.
It's not assigned. So
Oh no, it's already assigned. Okay.
No, I think so.
Right. Okay. I'm to do it one more time. Let me handle this. Okay. So I already have the breakout room here, and it's going to be closed. Okay. So Hero, Les would like to join, and he share with me. I don't see my name on the participant to share the breakout room. Could you check on that?
Don't either.
Yeah. Okay. Just one moment, because I don't know. There's something wrong. I already created, and assign everyone, and then
It shows here a message saying the breakout room will close in 20 seconds. So
yeah, because
I
I
don't
have to.
know.
Oh,
So I think
sorry.
maybe you just reset it. Maybe I'm not sure.
Okay, sorry.
I
Because
think
the
you just
first time,
closed
I
it.
think, and I think if we don't get sent to a breakout room, those of us that don't get sent to a breakout room, we stay here in the quote lobby, unquote, and we're
oh yeah,
kind of our
I
breakout.
think
room. That's been my
everyone,
experience.
yeah, I know this is okay. Because I have to now, I open our room already. I open again. Okay, and then can you have to click join. Okay, Carol, can you see?
I see no invitation. I see nothing on, here we go. Yes, now I got it. I'm room 3. Thank you.
Okay, everyone should be able to see the invitation to join the breakout room. Okay.
Right now, Parney, you and Elaine Shinagawa is not assigned.
Okay, I'm going to get her into room 1. Oh, I don't see my name though. I don't see my name to join.
I think maybe because you're trying to post it. But did you want to go into some room?
Yeah,
You can tell me.
let's
I can put you there.
okay, can you send yeah, send me so Les can join because I
Yeah.
will
Which room do you want to go into?
let's see. I can see the one that had less people. How
Right
about
now-
join room 5? 5.
Okay. I'll send you to room 5.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
thank you. So but okay, thank you. So now join. Okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Did everybody be everybody in?
Hi. I came back because I was the only one in the breakout room.
Okay. Did you right now there should be Barney and to your room. Are you able to go back into your room, Anna?
I don't know how to do that.
Okay, let me see.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for your talk.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for coming.
I wanted to come here. I'm not disappointed.
Oh, good.
I am not sure. I think, is this maybe group 5 right now? No,
No.
no, it's not. Um, let me see. I'm gonna move you to another room first, and then I'll move you back into 5. Is that okay? I can't select.
Whatever
I
you
can't
need to
select
do.
5 right now. So let me move you
Okay.
to 3, and then I'll move you back into 5 once you accept that.
Okay, thank you.
And then Leslie should be in that room. So. And then, okay, and then Dr. Bernice, did you want to go into room 5 as well? Is that
Well,
okay?
what I
Or did-
heard
Mhm.
was they were told they could ask me to come visit. Now, the
Mhm.
question is, how will I know that?
Yeah, that's the same for me. I don't know how to jump from one room to another. On yours, on the lower, do you see where it says breakout rooms?
I see I have a function for more. Yes.
Yes. On the,
Mhm.
I think in the middle area, there is a place that says
Oh, I'm in there.
breakout rooms. If you click on that, I think a pop-up screen will show
I
all the
see it.
rooms. And I
Yes,
think if
sir.
you just click on the join, you can
Mhm.
move from one room to another. I think that's how it works for a co-host.
You are brilliant. Thank you.
So yeah, if you like to just keep hopping rooms and see if anyone
Okay.
and see where you get stuck the longest now.
Oh, you're so kind. And what will you do, my dear friend?
I'm just gonna be like a moderator, and I'll just jump from one room to another as well to see if
Oh.
everybody's on the same page.
Thank you for all you've done to help make today.
Oh no, my
Appreciate
pleasure.
that. Thank you. Well, let's see.
Maybe
What
you want to start
happened
from
to
room
my
1?
colleague? Well, actually, I see my name there in 5. Why don't
Mhm.
I start there and see what she says? I will utilize that as I
Mhm.
move. There are 6 rooms. Am I correct?
7 as far as I see that Porny made.
Oh, okay. Well, let me see how I spread myself in 15 minutes.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Everyone has about 50 seconds to come back to this room, so we'll just wait for everyone.
Okay. How did everyone do in the breakout room? Get to talk a little bit. Okay. So,
Carol and Terry, we had a chance to meet very briefly before we got the beeped out. But I just want to say it was nice to be in your group for a short time.
oh yeah, sorry, it's kind of all this. That's good, yeah. And
It's
so you
like
can,
10 seconds.
yeah. All right. So everyone was back here.
Yes, I think everyone's back.
Okay. Hope you have a great time discussed in the small group discussion. And now it's time for us to hear from each group. If you want to share, we have 7 groups. So maybe if we can make about 1 minute, so we give the time. Is that okay? About 1 minute for the report back. Okay, who want to go first? Can just unmute and go ahead for 1
Maybe we
minute.
can just go in order from the room numbers. So
Oh.
we'll start with room number 1. I think it's Michael's room.
Okay, and I was in room number 1 with Michael and Elaine, and didn't take too many notes, but with only 1 minute, I'll just share what I remember. And one of the things that we discussed was kind of the root source of the exploitation of both the environment and of human beings, and sort of stemming from this mentality of otherness and the illusion of otherness. Somehow our minds, especially, white European culture, mind of separation and exploitation, leading to both those problems. We also talked about the action and the individual and the group, and we kind of raised the example of Opal Lee that Dr. Martinez discussed, and how that is an example of how they're interrelated. Like the example of one person's commitment to walk at such an advanced age to make this a reality, to get recognition as a holiday for Juneteenth, and just the amount of group support that attracted. And we kind of talked about the importance of vows and commitments in Buddhism too. And so we saw some parallels there. And finally, well, many things. My Grandmother's Hands is a book that Michael recommends highly. And so I definitely wrote it down as one that I'd like to check out myself. And there's the cover of it that Michael's holding up. And then we kind of discussed some too about how much we can learn about our own human selves, all of us, but Michael and I, like for instance, as white males, from learning about struggles in other cultures, other peoples, that there's something innate in all of us. And so we're learning about ourselves too when we learn about these other struggles as well. So very rich discussion. So I want to thank both the speaker and also to Abe for organizing this event. I'm so glad I joined. Thank you.
Okay, group number 2, room 2.
Well, hi, this is Judy, and Rachel is, I'm not sure she's even listening in, but I was hoping, oh, Rachel.
I'm here.
Would you report for us,
Okay.
please?
Okay, I can try.
Thank you.
I wasn't planning to, but I'll go as fast as I can. So Judah and I, it was just the 2 of us, and we talked about experiences we had growing up in California and in the North, and how we thought things were better in the places we were, but maybe we learned otherwise as we grew up. Jude had interesting experiences, unintentionally being desegregating bathrooms when she took a bus trip to Louisiana as a young woman. And so that was pretty interesting and cool. We also talked about how a lot of people who don't live in the islands here in Hawaii kind of throw out at us that, oh, it's a racial paradise in Hawaii, but in fact, it is not. We have a different construction of race and different races, but our racism here is just as prevalent as any place. It's just constructed a little differently. And how, just for example, the Native Hawaiians in prisons, it's something like 40%, even though the population outside of prisons is like 15%, which tracks pretty closely to what you'll find for African Americans on the mainland. And then we talked a little bit about the relationship between Buddhism and social justice, and how compassion can be a very good foundational place to work from. And how even just the act of thinking of others every time you sit down to a meal is very helpful. It gets you in the habit of thinking of other people. And I forget the term Joan used, but I think it was manifestation, how important it is that like that helps so much and works. So there's sort of a scattering of topics that we talked about. I hope that covers it well, Joan. If there's anything I left out, please. Okay. All right. And thank you, Bernice, and thank you, Habe, for setting up this call. It was really great.
Yes.
Thank you. Room 3. So it's going to be Terry and Sam and Carol.
Terry, you want to talk? Where'd she go? There she is.
Can you
You're on
talk,
mute,
please?
sweetie. There you are. You want me to talk?
Can, please?
Okay. Well, we had gone back to Terry's original statement that she had known a girl who grew up in Texas like I did, that she was taught that the South had won the war. And I said, I'm not sure we were taught that. I know I was not taught in school that we won the war, because I knew about the Appomattox courthouse and Robert E. Lee surrendering his sword to Ulysses S. Grant. But we, our relatives, and certainly a good deal of population in the former Confederacy, acted as though the South had won, and they still do, and that's part of the problem. And she said, well, what about that statement, the South shall rise again? I said, right there, that's proving the South fell, and they're saying it will rise again. So they were begrudgingly acknowledging that they lost. But Terry, I don't want to share your story about how people were calling you out at one point, or I don't know if you want to share that, but it was fascinating to me that you were called out growing up in DC.
Oh, there were Black children in our school that thought that I was someone passing for white, that I had some Black blood. And I have a nephew that, is part Black, and he looks just like me. So it does happen. There are people that look like me that are part Black way back in their history. And yeah, every time these kids would see me, they would just scream at me, look, there's a Black girl. Like they announced to me, there's a Black girl there,
But it was the Black kids doing that.
Yeah, it was the Black kids doing that. They were so angry at me. And this sounds ridiculous now because I'm very fair now. I've had a lot of sickness and my complexion shows it. But it was pretty wild. And I kind of feel sorry for them because and for people too that are passing, because they have a choice, right? There's a temptation there. When you are very dark Black person, everybody knows you're Black. There's no choice, right? You're stuck with it. But someone who looks white and who could pass for white, can you imagine what an enormous temptation that is? That you could accomplish your dreams and everything if everybody believed you were white.
If you deny your heritage. Yeah. And I was telling Terry and Sam that one of my best friends on the mainland, Kathy, she's the youngest of 7 children, and every one of them has a different pigmentation level. She could be a total identical twin to her sister, who's not her twin, except that she's very fair skinned, hazel-eyed, freckled even. And if she wanted to pass, she sure could. She doesn't. She's proud of all of her heritage, which is quite unique. And yet, when she's alone in a room with people who think she's not Black, she hears some pretty horrible stuff. And I was saying to Terry, what then Kathy says is, by the way, you should know I'm Black. And they go, oh, well, I didn't know that. And how interesting that they don't apologize for the hatred and the poison they spoke. They dump it back on her like, well, you should have told me I was Black and I wouldn't have said it in front of you. But they don't apologize for harboring this poison and spewing it out when they think everyone in the room is not Black. It just, so again, in a way, yeah, the South.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to room 4.
Hi, this is Chico speaking, and I was in room 4 with Andy Hoffman and Katsumi Takemoto. And I'll just briefly say, share what we talked about, but Andy started out saying that he had just become aware of Juneteenth, and it brings up the whole question of freedom and prejudice. And he said one can be free in law, but not in terms of resources and opportunities. And Katsumi mentioned the Bodhisattva Kannong and how this we can use this Kannong Bodhisattva approach to embrace suffering and transform suffering internally into love and light, that it can be a very powerful practice of using the Kannong Bodhisattva's loving kindness, like our aloha. And I had said that I feel responsibility now to learn more about Black history, just to become more aware of the suffering of the Black people. We talked a little bit about Hiroshima, mentioned the Holocaust, and about how important it is to talk with young people and to change the educational system to create more awareness of Juneteenth and the history of the Black people, but also that our Buddhist practice is a good training ground for us to look deeply into ourselves, into our own conditioning, our own prejudice, and to look at ourselves with eyes of compassion as well.
Thank you. Moving on to room number 5.
Hi, everyone. I was in room 5 with Les and Parani. And we talked about many things, and it was just a kind of a question and response format. And I'm sorry, I didn't realize that there would be a report back because I didn't take thorough notes. But from what I can recall, we were talking about many things and the connections, both known and unknown, that we have with each other. And we were just kind of touching on a few of those. But one of those connections was how about almost 40 years ago, on this day, June 19th, a man, Vincent Chen, was attacked, and he was killed a few days later because somebody thought that he was Japanese. And this was in Detroit, Michigan, when there was a lot of changes going on with the whole car industry. And they saw an Asian man and thought he was Japanese, beat him up, and then he died. But that was can be considered a moment in the consciousness of Asian Americans to really connect with other Black Americans and the whole civil rights movement and the need for social justice, not just for one group or our own group or self-groups, but for how all of us are all part of this huge system of suffering. And then we talked about so many more. It was so interesting. We had Dr. Martinez join us for a long time, talking about the importance of finding that place within us where we make a choice, how we want to get involved, how we want to engage in this. And we don't do this until we know, if I got this right, until we know that we want to do it. We should not be forced to do it, but we have to find that place within us. And the question was, well, how do we do that? What supports, what resources, you know, how do we do this? And part of it is just over time, life experience, we develop that. And also I think just by continuous efforting, for lack of a better word. And I'm sure there was more. Please help me, Parani, or less if I missed.
Oh, you did great. Thank you, Anna. We can move on. Thank you so much, Anna. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Room number 6, Glenda.
Your senior second baseman when they suffered a dislocated shoulder.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I guess Maya had to leave, and I didn't really take notes, but we had a free-ranging conversation, certainly about how different it was growing up here, because the Black population here is so small, you know, and I certainly didn't know anything about Juneteenth until, you know, several years ago. It was never in any of the curricula, certainly not in public schools, and they're totally unaware. But we did talk about some small connection to the African-American experience in terms of the internment of the Japanese during the war. And she said that her relatives were interned, and the effect that it has on your psyche, whether all the emotions involved, anger, bitterness, shame, all of those things, and Japanese culturally, they don't really talk about it, so they just hold it in, but it got to come out somehow. We talked a bit about Les's question regarding whether or not our speaker was optimistic about the future. And when we did talk about the hope, the one hope I think that was more evident was in terms of the youth, because our youngsters are used to a far more open society, whether it's LGBT, you know, it's not as big a deal to have 2 daddies or 2 mommies, that kind of thing. That I think that genie really can't be stuffed back into the bottle. But short term, with all the legislation going on, trying to deny history, that of course is something that is concerning to us. And then we talked about, well, I talked about thinking about where I want to go on vacation. I'm thinking, well, do I really want to go to New York City and get smashed in the face by some random person? I mean, you know, it's in the back of my mind, really, and that's kind of frightening because that's never something that we ever had to think about before. And other things, but that's basically the gist of what we talked about.
Okay, thank you very much. The last room, room 7.
People should mute themselves so we don't have feedback if you don't speaking. Thank you.
I think that, Catherine, you want to go first?
No, go ahead, Marcus. I'll come after you.
Okay. Yeah, we were 3 people in one room with 2 accounts. And we talked a lot about, I brought up the background growing up in Austria and how it ties in with our dark spots in history that have a tendency to be overlooked and forgotten. And we both, or the 3 of us, were agreeing that it is very important to keep the conversation alive and keep the history alive and keep the flashlight on, basically, and keep it on the dark spots that are so that they are not forgotten over time. And another thing that brought up was, as I remember, the suggestion what we can do to vote by our vote with our Catherine.
Right. I missed the last part of what you were saying, Marcus, but I'll just continue. We spent a bit of time getting to know each other because we had never met each other before. We're on different islands and have different backgrounds, and it was interesting to get to know each other. We did talk about discrimination and racism in Hawaii, including the Native Hawaiian people and the colonialism that has affected them. And what?
Micronesians.
Yeah, we talked about Micronesians and discrimination against them in Hawaii and colonialism that has also affected them. And we talked about the exploitation of people, the environment, and animals that all of us are doing. And Marcus mentioned that we can vote with our credit cards as we engage in our capitalism. We also didn't know we were going to report out, so I didn't take notes, so I'm trying to remember. Anyway, okay, that's about it. But it was very nice talking with you, Marcus.
That's about it.
Hey, thank you
It
very
was very
much.
nice to meet you. And thank you very much for putting this all together.
Oh, okay. So, and first of all, thank you, my sister Bernice. Where are you? I couldn't see you. Okay, there you are. Thank you so much. It was an excellent, informational, educational for us to learn more about Juneteenth. And thank you everyone for coming in to get to know each other and exchange idea about what we know about Juneteenth. And it's time for us to go away, not to go away, to go and do your own thing. I mean, lots of people have another meeting. Actually, I have another meeting as well. However, time is just whatever is going to happen. So we just not really stick to the minute. So I hope it's okay with our vice president who will have to close out. And anyone last thought? Bernice, just half a minute.
It's for everyone to go back to your own field to engage in Buddhism, right, Barney?
Okay. That I get the timer, so I be sure that I'm on time. Okay. Thank you again, everyone. And as usual, we're going to send our good thought with Metta Sutta to everyone to live together well. And our Vice President, Reverend Jiko Nakere, will help with this. And I will share the screen so people get to see what she's talking about. And here we are. Okay. Jiko?
Yes. May all beings be happy. May they be joyous and live in safety. All living beings, whether weak or strong, in high or middle or low realms of existence, small or great, visible or invisible, near or far, born or to be born, may all beings be happy. Let none deceive another, nor despise any being in any state. Let none by anger or hatred wish harm to another. Even as a mother, at the risk of her own life, watches over and protects her only child, so with a boundless mind should one cherish all living things, suffusing love over the entire world, above, below, and all around without limit. So let each cultivate an infinite goodwill toward the whole world.
Thank you so much, Reverend Nakade. And again, my sister Bernice for excellent presentation as always. And thank you everyone to making time to come in and help us learn and celebrate Juneteenth. And now it's time to go and then try to spread out what the meaning of Juneteenth. Not everyone on this island know. Many programs that I said, oh, happy Juneteenth. What is Juneteenth? So now I have more information to share with them. And also for help, if you look at our website, hawaiibuddhist.org, we have all these past and future past program recording and future program like coming. And also just to help you to understand also, we have the monthly monthly meditation and peace prayer to send it to Ukraine and to Lachen also. And we take turn between women and men. And this month, on the fourth Sunday, June 26th, we have our president and teacher of Diamond Sangha, Michael Kiran Rochi, will lead us into that meditation. Thank you so much, Michael. And you can go and sign up for our program. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Hero.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank